Welcome to Antarctica Did That For Me. We're a podcast for everyday people with a little adventure in their hearts. We're Keri and Cassa, and we've spent huge chunks of our time living and working in Antarctica. Welcome to a journey that changed our lives. We hope it will change yours too.
Hey everyone, it's Keri and Cassa from Antarctica Did That For Me. And today we are going to talk about something that we started to talk about in the last episode we did. We were talking about the ultimate world cruise and how that was weirdly like Antarctica in the winter, and also how we learned all about it on TikTok, of all places, and the TikTok content coming out of there. And I know then we just started talking how about we'd like to maybe chat about social media a little bit and how that has changed in this world. It has changed people's relationship with how they see the world and changed the relationship of how people see Antarctica and Antarcticans see themselves too, along with things like LinkedIn, which you're really active on, and all the other platforms. It's a real world shaper. I know you have some thoughts about this too, so I'll stop talking for a sec.
No, I love that idea of it being a world shaper because I think you're absolutely right. And it's something that helps us share and create, but it also is something that helps us maybe edit ourselves more than we probably should. But, it's basically, how we perceive the world around us and create our opinions based on the way that we consume information. And that depends on how we prefer to consume it. You and I have talked about this a lot, video versus audio or both or whatever. We've had people ask us a lot of questions about Antarctica. A lot of times those have been based on things that they've seen on social media or things that they've experienced through video, etc. For me too, it's also about how this shapes how we understand, how we think about adventure, right? So when we create these videos that are very much about adventure or minutia, like you had talked about so I'm obsessed with like tiny things. I love videos of tiny things. I don't know.
Good job, creators out there doing that.
Oh my God, make more of those weird tiny videos, please. There's just something about those that I find really, really satisfying and really, really interesting for some reason. It's just thinking about like, is there adventure in that? I don't know, maybe, but it's certainly very creative, and I love that. And I just love it's being weird.
Passion. I think it's communicating passion. That's what I love about even the quietest ones. And I think what we're talking about when we talk about just like keeping how you can change your life through honoring the adventure in your heart is making tiny little felt eggs adventurous. No, maybe. I think that it is, and that it is opening yourself up to a space that is a different space from the usual, and being willing to post about it and share it with other people, thereby building community for other people who might have their scratch itched by that sort of creativity. Adventure isn't always climbing mountains in Antarctica. Adventure is sometimes just having a little bit of courage to build your world a little bit better in the way that you'd like it. So in that way, I really do like those creators on social media. I know that when I consume, it's less business oriented, and I'd love for you to share what you're seeing in that direction on LinkedIn.
Yeah, so I mean, I would say probably the social media platform that I use the most would be LinkedIn. I like Instagram a lot as well. I've been on LinkedIn, I don't know, I have a long time. When they used to send you like 1 million emails telling you some boring update that you didn't care about, and then I finally figured out how to fix my settings. But it used to just be this kind of resume website. And I think it's really evolved into a lot more than that in the past. It's probably 5 years in particular. I'm seeing a lot and I'm hearing a lot more about the youths, as I like to call them, but, maybe Gen Z or somebody. People, definitely people who are 20 years younger than me who are interested in LinkedIn because it feels a little bit more like a place that you can have a genuine conversation. I mean, it's not that there won't be trolls or anything like that happening, but it does feel like since there's already this kind of topic, which is work, and it can be whatever your passion is too. It can be just because we're spending, 40 to 60 hours a week doing this thing. It's a huge chunk of our lives, and it's really important to us. And when you can have these conversations about that in a place that is dedicated to having a conversation about that, I think it's actually really freeing for a lot of people. And then you do see personal content, of course, and it really resonates for people. Storytelling really resonates for people. I mean, LinkedIn is definitely the one that I'll look at the longest and the most, and I get most involved. And I've created amazing relationships there. I will say, like, I've definitely had some really great relationships that have generated on LinkedIn in a very organic and genuine way. And I don't know if I would have been able to do that on other platforms, to be honest.
I find that fascinating because again, we go off the ranch a little bit from Antarctica in a lot of our episodes, but it's because there is a thread that pulls us back to how we learned to experience the world because of our time in Antarctica. And we were talking about social media, and I love that LinkedIn has become that. I'm not active really at all on LinkedIn. I'm more active on, I'm probably Instagram and TikTok are the most active socials for me. And I'm definitely not the first, nor will I say the most interesting things about this, but all of those platforms are changing. TikTok especially is changing. I would say it is not changing in a way that connects people more. And in fact, businesses are really king, even small level businesses. And you and I are going to put some of our podcasts on TikTok, and we're technically a little business, even though we're just like doing our thing.
Yeah.
But it's become more of a hustle game and a less organic connecting with true heart game. I'm not saying that you can't be that with a business. Obviously, we care passionately about this thing, and people with their businesses do too. But it's a different kind of reason that you're trying to connect with people. You want something from people, where when you come at it from you can come at it from a space where you're not wanting anything. In fact, you're trying to give to people. And that sounds like what's happening maybe on a little bit better way on LinkedIn than it is on some of the socials that I'm consuming. TikTok is going through some big changes. It's not necessarily a platform I'm recommending really at all to people very much. Somewhat. I used to recommend it really hard. And the reason that TikTok was special to me was that it connected me with people who had the courage to open their hearts. That's the thing we're trying to get people to do here. That's what we learned how to do with our relationship with Antarctica. We think it'll make their lives better. And I think TikTok's moving away from that. They probably never had that as a mission, but that was what was happening latently. And now more things are taking that space. But we're finding that social media, I think, is really social. Like the social part of it is the reason that people were on the media in the first place. And I'm really glad to hear that there's some places where that's going right.
Well, and I wouldn't say that LinkedIn is 110% like the perfect shining example of social media by any stretch. And there's certainly, I mean, we're all on there to promote something in some way, right? But I would say that the amount of learning, and that's what I love about LinkedIn, is that you can follow creators that are really great writers, great thinkers, and start your day or have a breakfast and read something that's really interesting. And I'm not saying that you can't do that on other, I mean, you control your feed, right? You choose what you follow and you choose what you put into your psyche essentially through these platforms. But I do think that there's a lot of really interesting content that comes out on LinkedIn. Maybe it's not the tiny videos that I love so much, the tiny craft videos, this idea of self-promotion without cynicism and self-promotion that creates community versus self-promotion that doesn't. I mean, this is something that I struggled with a long time. I mean, when I left the ice, when I left Antarctica, I moved to New Zealand and I started my own business. And it was after basically getting denied for like 160 jobs that I applied for because I didn't have the right visa. And so finally It was like, I only had to work through partnership visa. So people were like, I'm not going to hire you at this level with that visa. That doesn't make sense for us as a business, which I get. So it was good because it helped me not take it so personally because it really sucked.
Right.
But I realized, I was like, people are making money on the internet. What are they doing? Like, how are they doing that? And so I started looking into this and I started realizing like LinkedIn was a good place for me to start to have these conversations with people. And a lot of people were very generous with me, especially in those early years when I was on LinkedIn. So I think that was a big part of it for me, but it was really scary for me to start creating and start posting as well, because it felt like this, hey, look at me thing, like this very, I mean, like that's scary about doing the podcast too. You know, it's you're constantly feeling like, oh, people are going to think, who does she think she is? And I remember when I first made my first website, I could hear this one guy in particular that I actually he wasn't my nemesis in Antarctica, but we didn't really like each other that much. Anyway, I could hear his voice be like, oh, Cass has got a website. You know, it's just like all these things. So, you know, it's this idea of consuming content, consuming and creating, or just consuming or just creating. And I think that I like to have a balance of both, because being able to share and being able to give can be really, really helpful to other people. And I have certainly received the benefit of that.
I am certain, given the people I know who follow both of us, that there are people out there listening right now who are wondering if they have the courage to put some of their creativity, some of the things we're talking about, some of that heart-opening stuff I would include myself in this category. I'm super nervous. I've done it and I got so scared by all the comments that I kind of backed off. But what would you say to them? You're a business coach. I personally would love to hear you talk about finding the courage. I know there are people listening who want to know this.
I mean, the hard part for I think most people is understanding how to take feedback that's valid and use it, and how to let go of feedback that is not helpful. And that is the thing I think that a lot of people are afraid of. They're afraid of rejection. And so it comes down to being okay with being rejected, especially by people who actually aren't your people anyway. And don't really matter to what you're trying to create. Either they don't get it because they can't, or they don't get it because they won't. So either way, there's no point in beating your head against the wall trying to convince them that you're right, in my opinion. It's kind of one of these things. I mean, I talk about imposter syndrome a lot with my clients and in my business. And I realized that part of the reason that there was a couple of reasons I started talking about that. One of them was that people kept coming to me over and over and saying, I struggle with imposter syndrome, right? And at first I was kind of like, get over yourself. Nobody cares that much about you to be thinking that you're an imposter. They're just worried about themselves. And that's a very like Montana way of thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
And it's a very, I would say cold way of thinking about it. But that was my first reaction, was just like, get out of your own butt, like just nobody cares. Like just do the thing and let them do what they need to do. But I realized part of the reason that I have that attitude a little bit more now is because I've had imposter syndrome since I was a little kid. Right. We've talked about this before. Like we both grew up as kind of outsiders. And I think pretty much everybody could say this to some degree or another, right? Yeah. Who was the perfect person who always fit in and who always had the right hair and who always had the right, I don't know, clothes, whatever, right? Like none of us did. But somehow we internalize this and we create this, I'm an imposter, that makes that meaning. So for me, I grew up, my mother was a single mother. We grew up pretty poor in a town that I wouldn't say is like super fancy by any stretch, but not everybody was as poor as we were. And it was a very small town too. So, we kind of had this, we were always outsiders. And then when I moved to California, I just felt like the biggest country bumpkin on the planet. I was just this big dummy from Montana. I had no idea what was going on. I moved to San Francisco. So for me, it just became part of my identity of I just don't fit anywhere. And you just get so used to it. Yeah, you just get so used to it that I'm not saying that it's just like anything. You build a habit. You start to build that ability to accept without letting it stop you. If that makes sense. It's a very long way of describing this. But I think that's
valuable information for me and for people who are probably fans of yours already. Or just, I think that's really great advice. If you don't mind, I would love to continue to talk about social media, but turn it just a little bit and ask you, and I've not asked you this before, so if you don't have a good answer, that's fine. But when you've seen effective social media, Antarctica kind of social media, what has that been for you, or have you seen any? I have a few opinions about this, but I don't know if I know all the answers either.
No, I think that's a great question. I'm glad that you did change it that way.
If you don't mind, I'm going to preface it by this too. I really, really think as I look for Antarctica-related stuff on social media, there are definitely some stars, some people doing amazing, amazing content. Some of them are our friends, and I just cheering for them. Keep going. But we're losing, science in general is losing the game. A lot of researched knowledge in the feed of the social flip is losing. Like the Antarctica stuff, you could take a look yourself. It's a lot of people who have never been to Antarctica and are pretty skeptical about some things that are going on down there with no knowledge about it that I really have seen. So I want social media for Antarctica to succeed, and I want it to be better, and I want it to connect with people, like the people who are listening to us, people who are there not to get shouted down or not to whatever. They're there to learn something, they learn to see something cool.
And I think actually you just hit the nail on the head. I think it's about learning, and I think it's about anytime social media can teach you something that's, even if it's just funny, if it's just like the little tiny crafts of like, oh, I didn't know you could make a little fairy house in a walnut shell. Ooh, that can be that spark of like, ooh, interesting. Like that's that interest. And I can't really speak to what you're speaking about with some of the inaccurate social media because I haven't really seen that in regards to Antarctica in particular. But I think the stuff that's really good that's coming out is stuff that is visual and visually compelling. And it's not the same old thing too. Like, so for example, I mean, a lot of times, I mean, it's like ice, snow, penguins, like these are all cool things about Antarctica. Let's be real. But these are the things you see over and over about Antarctica. So I think that they've been, played, for lack of a better word. So the brand itself needs a little bit of a refresh if to be weird about it, actually, as someone who's worked in branding for years.
It's true.
Yeah. And so I think that, that's, I think, part of the goal of what we're doing here with this podcast is having that human spin on Antarctica as well. Because yes, we can learn a lot from science, but we can also learn a lot from it being a social experiment, essentially.
Yeah, I think so too. I know we've got some episodes coming up where we're really going to talk about many of the aspects of socialness that are unique and inspiring about Antarctica. So I'm really excited for those casts too. But
So tell me what you think the great social media that's coming out about Antarctica looks like for you.
Oh boy. I mean, I've been lately in the social media game in Antarctica for many years. And hey, and if you're looking for Simply Antarctica, you can check it out. But I have struggled with finding the right balance to communicate to people. I think the things that have been the most popular that I have shared, it fit exactly that. There's something that tells a story about what's happening down there. I communicate mostly in photos. I used Instagram a lot. And any photo that told a story of something that was happening a little bit differently, even if it was what that bird was doing or maybe where that penguin was going in relation to something else, those were better things and they were more sincere and well received. I'm going to say that this podcast is not yet sponsored, but what I say is not a sponsored comment, but I am going to point it out. And it's about a platform that I've criticized already in this podcast, but it's TikTok, and it is buried. But did you know, Cassa, that TikTok has created a tab that is STEM? It is specifically for science, technology. You know what I mean? It's called STEM.
I did not know that.
It comes up right by my friends and my For You page. It's a third one, and you have to activate it. And I can't tell you exactly how I did it, but it wasn't that hard. You kind of have to go into the menu a little bit. It's the only choice to activate another tab like that. And it's really cool. And when you're on that STEM tab, you get to see it's basically it's good science. It's good learning stuff.
Interesting.
Now, is it the most compelling stuff in the... Do you know what? It's getting better because I started following these STEM videos. I've been following them for probably 3 years now, 3 or 4 years. And they started out pretty grim because, of course, a lot of people doing science, this is like, they're up at 6 a.m. I've watched them in their labs and they are doing their data slides and then they're still there at 4 a.m. So social media is not what they can be doing right now. But for the people who are doing those things, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to do good social media. Thank you for taking up some of the space that conspiracy theorists are taking in Antarctica talk and just in general in science. We need the good information out there, and I really, really appreciate people who make those videos, and I really encourage people who are listening to us right now to just do a little search on the internet, figure out how to get that STEM tab activated and watch it. You're going to learn a lot, and you're going to be helping. And I think our listeners are helpers. I really
well,
have
I think
that
that's, you brought up a great point too, is like that hopefulness too, of like, a lot of times when you see Antarctica stuff, it's really doomsday. I mean, the West Antarctica ice shelf collapsing, all these things, and they are sad. Don't get me wrong; they're very sad. But also, I want that yes and there's also these other things happening. So it's thinking about, again, how do we help people appreciate those things without getting basically just pressed all the time, right?
Yeah.
And how do we help social media lift us up and lift up our narratives every day? It can be through the platform that we engage with the most, but of course, controlling your feed is a really big part of that.
I agree. We can be part of the problem. I mean, part of the, well, I'm going to be part of the problem, but we can be part of the solution. Like supporting these things, giving your social media time that you give yourself into the day, and making sure it's full of some healthy food along with some of the non-healthy food. Do you know what I mean? Like I really, that's a responsibility, even if you're not thinking about posting. And I think some people listening might be thinking about posting. So please do it and post content that helps the world. But also, if you're just a consumer, if you're a consumer of social media, help them that way too. Consume some things that spread knowledge and spread light, basically, in a world that
Well, and I do a
that.
detox every couple months. I go through and just unfollow accounts that I'm kind of like, yeah, they haven't really been, it just hasn't really been creating the narrative that I want to create in myself, So I think it's really important to do that too, and just kind of go through and be really selective about what you are allowing into your, and not to the point where it's like, oh, I can't allow any other realities in. No, but I think that there's this addiction to the 24-hour news cycle that we've all grown up with that is super harmful to people's, and we see studies of this and all these kinds of things, but it's harmful to your mental health. But I also think it's harmful to the reality that you're creating for yourself. And so I think that, depending on which platform you think that it is more appropriate for you, you're going to be able to use the power of the words and the things that you're putting into your brain to create your reality and that adventure.
I love that, Cassa. That's
excellent.
That's a really good way. That's a really good final thought.
Yeah. So that is the final thought. That's our call to action, is just to kind of think about which platform helps you, why, and how you want to make it show up for you, basically.
And my call to action, I love that one. So do what Cassa has suggested, and also just look for some of that good science, technology, that STEM media, whatever platform you're on, even if you're just still in a paper newspaper, whatever. Honor those things.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Antarctica Did That For Me podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support our efforts, we would love it if you would tell your friends. And if you leave us a review on Spotify or Apple, it will help us find more of our fellow adventurers. We release a new episode every Tuesday, and we are a video and audio podcast, so you can watch or just listen. We're on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and more, or find everything, including links to our social media, at our website, antarcticadidthatforme.com. Thanks again for listening, and until next week, keep thinking about what opening your own heart to adventure could do for you.